A jealous heart digs a grave for its own soul before it ever touches yours. My dear chosen ones, let's make one thing clear from the start. When a pack of wolves cannot take down a lion, they do what cowards always do. They turn on each other. That's the natural order of jealousy. Envy is not just a fleeting feeling, it is one of the oldest poisons known to humankind. History proves it has destroyed kingdoms, friendships, families, and entire legacies. Science even backs it up. Envy raises stress hormones, weakens the body, erodes mental clarity, and shaves years off a person's life. So when a jealous group of people came together to plot against you, they weren't just trying to harm you, they signed a contract for their own destruction. And here's the irony they never saw coming. The very energy they directed at you is circling back to them like a boomerang. Return to sender. No stamps, no postage, no escape. They thought they were crafting your downfall, but all they built was a cage for themselves. Imagine mailing a package full of venom and forgetting you live in a fortress. That package doesn't get delivered. It sits on their doorstep, ticking louder, seeping poison into their own space. That's what jealousy does. It doesn't stop you, it devours them. Now I know what some of you chosen ones are thinking, but why me? Why does it feel like so many people are threatened by my very existence? The answer is simple, because you carry weight they cannot touch. If you were ordinary, if your presence didn't shift atmospheres, if your energy didn't command attention without effort, they wouldn't have gathered. Nobody calls a committee meeting for someone who doesn't matter. It took more than one voice, more than one hand, more than one plot to try and dim you. And that, chosen ones, is the loudest announcement of your power. Think of it like this. A single match doesn't threaten the ocean. But when a fire spreads so wide, it terrifies an entire forest. That's when people gather buckets, hoses, and every tool they can find. Your fire is that strong. It unsettles their shadows. It exposes their mediocrity. And instead of confronting their own emptiness, they made the fatal mistake of joining forces against you. But here's where the plot flips. They thought numbers would equal power. They thought moving in silence would equal safety. They thought hiding in the dark would equal strategy. What they didn't realize is that darkness doesn't protect, it only delays exposure. And when exposure comes, it doesn't whisper, it shouts. The lies they whispered about you are now echoing against them. The net they weaved for you is now their own trap. That's not coincidence, that's consequence. Before we dive deeper, chosen ones, take a quick moment to support this movement. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It's a small action, but it fuels us to keep creating more of this inspiring, life-changing, and energy-filled content for you. Every click, every share, every comment is what keeps this voice alive and spreading to others who need it just as much as you do. Chosen ones, let me ask you a question. Have you noticed how jealousy always reveals itself in the end? No matter how carefully people disguise it, no matter how polite the smiles or sweet the words, the cracks always show. Because envy is impatient. It burns holes in the very container that holds it. That's why their schemes leaked. That's why their whispers grew louder. That's why the truth is now crawling out from under the rock they tried to hide it beneath. Here's another truth you need to hold on to. Survival is the sharpest revenge. The harshest blow to those who plotted against you is not their chaos, it's your existence. Every day you wake up stronger, freer, rising higher. You're forcing them to face the brutal reality that their entire plot collapsed while you're still standing tall. They didn't just fail, they failed publicly. You became the proof that their story about you was a lie, their efforts a waste, their unity a weakness. And I want you to feel the power of this. Your silence was never weakness. It was strategy. While they screamed, you stood. While they plotted, you focused. While they clawed at shadows, you embodied light. You didn't need to fight dirty. You didn't need to get revenge. You didn't need to clap back. Because chosen ones don't need chaos to prove strength. Your resilience, your stillness, your survival, that is the evidence. So understand this. What was meant to bury you has become the stage that elevates you. What was whispered in rooms you were never invited to is now fueling the conversations that build your name higher. What was once used to mock you is now the very proof of your endurance. They thought they were digging a grave. In reality, they were laying the foundation stones for your rise. My chosen ones, don't mistake this moment. This is not petty revenge, not childish payback. This is justice in its rawest form, precise, balanced, undeniable. The energy they sent out has circled back. Their envy has become exposure. Their unity has become their cage. Their obsession has become their undoing. And your survival, your rise, your very existence has become the loudest reminder that no plot can erase what is meant to stand. So when you hear the noise, when you sense the tension, when you feel the whispers against your name, don't be shaken, smile. Because the louder they're plotting, the clearer the proof that you are chosen. And the harder they fall, the brighter your light shines. Stay with me, because what I'm about to break down will shake you to your core. The jealous group that united against you are already tripping over their own schemes. Their alliance was doomed from the start, and every move they thought was hidden in shadows is now unraveling in the open for all to see. This isn't just about what they did to you. This is about what their envy has unleashed upon themselves. And chosen ones, before we go any further, let me pause and thank you. Yes, you watching this right now. Your presence here is proof that you were never ordinary. While a jealous group of people plotted against you, karma is already moving on your behalf, and this message is reaching you at the exact moment you needed it most. If you feel that surge of truth in your chest, if you know deep down this is describing the very battles you faced, then show your power. Smash that like button, subscribe, and drop the number 77 in the comments so we know you're part of this unstoppable movement of chosen ones rising above envy and watching justice return to sender. You can even hit super thanks if you want to help fuel us to keep creating more of this energetic, life-shifting content for you. And now, let's dive into it step by step, because if you are truly chosen, you're about to recognize every single sign. Ordinary people won't understand this. Only chosen ones feel the weight and the blessing of this kind of justice. Let's get started. Number 1, the conspiracy that proved your power. The plot that proved you were fireproof. When it takes a whole crowd to bring you down, that's proof one person could never touch you. My dear chosen ones, let's put this under a spotlight, so bright no shadow can cover it. The fact that they had to gather as a group to come against you is not a sign of your weakness. It's the loudest, clearest announcement of your strength. One person's jealousy wasn't enough. One person's slander wasn't enough. One person's attack wasn't enough. It took a collective effort. That in itself is the evidence that you are fireproof. You are untouchable. Think about it. If you were ordinary, if you were easy to dismiss, if you were just another face blending into the crowd, there would have been no need for a committee. Nobody forms an army to fight a ghost. Nobody calls reinforcements for someone who doesn't matter. They had to gather because, one-on-one, they knew they would lose. That's the ultimate confession of your power. They couldn't defeat you in daylight, so they huddled in shadows, hoping that quantity would outweigh quality. But here's the brutal truth. A pack of sheep, no matter how many, will never outmatch a single lion. And that's what they didn't calculate. Their very plotting was their first mistake, because in the act of uniting against you, they revealed the depth of their fear. If you were nothing, they wouldn't have noticed you. If you were powerless, they wouldn't have wasted their breath. Their jealousy wasn't triggered by your weakness. It was ignited by the undeniable weight of your presence, the way you shift rooms without trying, the way you stand as living proof that mediocrity is a choice and greatness is a standard. You didn't have to announce your power. Their reaction did that for you. Now let me speak directly to you, chosen ones, because I know the question haunting your mind. Why would they all turn on me? Why did it feel like a crowd when I only walked alone? And the answer is this: you carried a presence so heavy that no single person could shoulder the task of trying to dim it. You were too much for one. You overwhelmed the capacity of any individual enemy. So they gathered like cowards in a corner, hoping that banding together would give them courage. But here's where it backfired. By multiplying their numbers, they didn't multiply their power. They multiplied their exposure. Picture it like this. One match in the dark can be hidden. But when dozens of torches gather in the same place, the fire is visible from miles away. That's what happened when they plotted. Alone, they might have hidden their envy. Together, they exposed themselves in broad daylight. And now, chosen ones, you see what they didn't. Their unity didn't strengthen them, it weakened them. Because the size of the attack always reveals the size of the threat. And in this case, the threat was never you falling, but you rising. Here's the irony they will never recover from. The more they plotted, the more they confirmed your significance. Their very obsession became the proof of your influence. People don't gather to destroy what doesn't matter. They only gather when someone's existence is shaking their false foundations. And chosen ones, that is what you did. Your mere presence reminded them of what they could never become. You didn't expose their cracks. They exposed themselves by trying to break you. And here's the knife twist they'll never pull out. Instead of shattering you, they shattered themselves. The moment they grouped up, they wrote their own exposure. The cracks in their foundation were revealed. Their desperation leaked through. Their fear screamed louder than their accusations. They became the mirror they couldn't face, so they tried to smash it. But mirrors don't break without reflection. In their attempt to shatter you, they ended up staring straight into their own fragility. Chosen ones, let this burn deep into your mind. Their plot was never about your destruction. It was about their confession. They confessed they feared you. They confessed they envied you. They confessed they couldn't touch you alone. And that is why they will never recover. Because every time they remember what they did, every time they replay those moments, they will have to admit they had to gather like an army just to try and dim one light. One. And they still failed. So understand this. What they thought would be your downfall has become undeniable proof that you were never ordinary. You were always a force. You were always fireproof. And that is the scar they will carry forever. Not that you fell, but that you stood tall while they needed a crowd and still couldn't move you. My dear chosen ones, this is the power you carry. Your strength is not in the battles you fought back. It's in the battles they couldn't even start without reinforcements. And that is why their story will never read as your loss. It will always be remembered as their exposure. Number 2, why envy targets essence, not possessions. Jealousy. Targets essence, not possessions. They don't envy what's in your hands, chosen ones. They envy the fire in your veins. My dear chosen ones, let's strip the mask off jealousy so you can see it for what it really is. They didn't gather against you because of what you own, what you drive, or the numbers in your bank account. If it were just about money, status, or material success, they could have copied, competed, or clawed their way to their own version. That would have been easier. No, their jealousy runs deeper than possessions. It is about essence, about the core of who you are, about that undeniable presence that can't be purchased, faked, or borrowed. And that's exactly why it torments them. Because chosen ones, there's something terrifying to small minds about someone who simply exists and yet commands respect without even trying. You didn't beg for validation. You didn't chase their approval. You didn't even bend yourself to fit their molds. And still, your presence spoke louder than their carefully curated performances. That silence, that unshakable authenticity, is what disturbed them the most. While they spent their days polishing masks, chasing scraps of recognition, and hiding their insecurities under layers of pretenses, you stood as living proof that authenticity carries a weight they can't replicate. You are not threatening because of what you've done. You are threatening because of who you are. And that, chosen ones, is the kind of jealousy that cuts the deepest. Think about it. They could tolerate your wins if your victories came from manipulation like theirs. They could stomach your progress if your growth was built on compromise like theirs. But the fact that you walk with a resilience they can't manufacture, a light they can't dim, and a calm power they can't imitate, it drives them into madness. Every time they look at you, they are staring at a standard they can never reach, no matter how hard they try. And that's why for them, plotting wasn't an option. It became their only hope of survival. They couldn't compete with your essence, so they thought maybe they could bury it. But what they failed to understand is this: essence is untouchable. They can strip away opportunities, but they cannot erase presence. They can poison reputations, but they cannot silence the way your spirit speaks before you even open your mouth. They can gather in their envy, but jealousy is never a strategy. It is only desperation, and desperation always leaks. Let's get brutally honest, chosen ones. Their obsession with you was never about the surface. It wasn't about your clothes, your career, your possessions, or even your wins. It was their quiet confession that they saw something in you they wished they had, but knew they could never obtain. It was proof that your very existence unsettled the counterfeit lives they had built. Think of it like this: a fake diamond can shine under the right light until a real one is placed beside it. The counterfeit is always comfortable until the authentic walks into the room. That's you. You didn't have to expose their lies. They exposed themselves the moment they realized your glow wasn't manufactured. Your very existence threatened their illusions, and that is a weight they couldn't bear. And here's the sting they'll never recover from. They weren't fighting against your achievements, chosen ones. They were fighting against reality, the reality that you can't be duplicated, you can't be replaced, you can't be forged in their factories of pretense. And that truth will haunt them longer than any punishment, because no matter what they try to build, no matter what image they attempt to project, deep down they know they can never recreate what you carry naturally. So understand this: when they plotted against you, they weren't declaring war on your possessions. They were confessing war against your essence. And that is the most lopsided battle they could have chosen, because essence never dies. Presence never fades. Authenticity never breaks. Chosen ones, let this sink in. Their jealousy is not a measure of your weakness. It is the clearest sign of your unmatched essence. And the more they try to fight it, the more they prove you are everything they cannot touch. Number 3. Declaring you the enemy was their own trap. The day they named you their enemy, they signed their own defeat. When you declare war on someone built for survival, you don't start their ending, you trigger your own. Chosen ones, let's get real about this point. The biggest mistake your enemies made wasn't the gossip, the lies, or even the traps they tried to set. No, the fatal blow they dealt themselves was in the moment they named you their enemy. The second they decided you were the target, the rival, the obstacle, they weren't just choosing you, they were choosing their own collapse. People think choosing an enemy is harmless. They think it's just another name in their mouth, another grudge to carry, another target for their bitterness. But what they never realized is that declaring someone as your enemy is never free. It comes with consequences. It's a contract written in energy. And when they tied your name to their obsession, they unknowingly tied themselves to your destiny. That was their trap. They thought they were defining you, but in reality, they were chaining themselves. Every conversation they had about you, every rumor they spread, every whisper they rehearsed was like weaving rope, except the rope wasn't for you. It was for them. They didn't know it, but every knot they tied in hate was a knot securing their own downfall. Let me put it this way, chosen ones. Imagine running a race. You're on your lane, focused, moving toward your finish line. Then someone jumps into their lane, looks at you and decides, that's my opponent, I'll beat them. But instead of running faster on their own track, they stop watching theirs and spend all their time trying to trip you. What happens? They stop progressing, they fall behind, and the more energy they waste focusing on you, the more they sabotage themselves. By the end, it isn't your strength that beat them, it was their obsession with you that destroyed their momentum. And that's exactly what happened here. By naming you their enemy, they stopped building their own path and started living inside yours. Every ounce of energy they used against you became fuel you didn't even have to touch. You gained authority over them without lifting a finger. Why? Because their hatred wasn't passive, it was active. And energy in motion always goes somewhere. In this case, it went right back to them. Chosen ones, some of you wonder, why does it feel like people who come against me end up crumbling, even without me doing anything? And the answer is simple, because they bound themselves to your rise. The moment they marked you as the one to bring down, their fate became tied to yours. And because you're rising, their exposure was inevitable. Here's the twist that makes this so powerful. They thought calling you the enemy gave them control. They thought it meant power, but in truth, it was their surrender. They handed their peace, their future, and their energy over to you. Without realizing it, they became dependent on your story. If you rise, they're exposed. If you shine, they're diminished. Their entire existence started revolving around trying to stop you. And that, chosen ones, is a cage of their own making. Think of it like planting seeds. You plant seeds of growth, focus, authenticity, and resilience. They plant seeds of envy, gossip, and destruction. The law of cause and effect doesn't play favorites. It multiplies whatever is sown. So while your harvest grows strong, their harvest grows toxic. And every attempt to choke your roots only poisoned their own soil. This is the danger of declaring someone an enemy. It's not just drama, it's alignment. They aligned themselves with your timeline, your momentum, your breakthroughs. The problem for them? You're chosen. You're built to survive storms they couldn't last 5 minutes in, so by choosing to stand against you, they weren't walking into victory. They were walking into a trap disguised as a rivalry. And chosen ones, I want you to let this sink in. You never had to wish anything on them. You didn't curse them. You didn't have to fight them. Their downfall wasn't punishment from outside. It was the natural consequence of the energy they chose to live in. The moment they called your name in hate, they created a link they couldn't break. And because of that, your rise automatically became their exposure. That's why everything they tried to build on the back of your name is collapsing. Their words have turned into evidence against them. Their alliances have become unstable. Their peace has shattered. Not because you pushed them, but because when you set yourself against someone meant to rise, you step off your own path and into quicksand. The harder you struggle, the faster you sink. So understand this, chosen ones. When they named you their enemy, they weren't winning. They were waving the white flag of their own defeat. They didn't put you in danger. They put themselves in chains. And now they're living with the truth that will haunt them long after the dust settles. Your victory is automatic, and their collapse was scripted the moment they spoke your name with malice. In the end, naming you their enemy wasn't power, it was their undoing. And the more they resist, the deeper the trap they built for themselves tightens. That's the price of envy. That's the cost of obsession, and that is why their downfall was sealed before the battle even began. Number 4. Real justice isn't revenge, it's precision. Justice doesn't settle for petty revenge, it executes precision. Revenge is noisy, justice is silent until it strikes, and when it does, no one mistakes the difference. My dear chosen ones, let's talk about something that separates the ordinary from the extraordinary, how you deal with betrayal, lies, and calculated attacks. When people hurt us, the first instinct is always the same. I want them to feel what I felt. I want them to pay the price in the same currency they used against me. That's human nature. That's what any ordinary mind would crave. But you, chosen one, were never built for ordinary. And that's why the outcome of your battles never looks like petty revenge. It looks like surgical justice. Revenge is about reaction. It's fueled by anger, by ego, by the impulse to throw back whatever was thrown at you. But justice, true justice, is different. It doesn't copy the crime. It flips the entire script with precision. It doesn't waste time making your enemies cry for your entertainment. It exposes them in a way that reveals their own corruption without you ever lowering yourself to their level. That is the difference between the ordinary cycle of payback and the higher law of balance. And let's be brutally honest. Revenge feels good for a second, but it always comes with a cost. It stains your hands, it clouds your judgment, and it drags you down into the mud where your enemies already live. That's why chosen ones are built differently. You don't win by playing their game. You win by letting their own game consume them. Look closely, and you'll see it happening already. Every lie they spread about you is backfiring, not because you exposed them, but because the very lie is now holding up a mirror to their character. Every trap they dug for you is snapping shut on their own ankles. Every curse they muttered under their breath is echoing back louder in their own house. This isn't random chaos, this is precision. This is justice operating like a scalpel, cutting through the noise and targeting the root. Chosen ones, do you see how powerful that is? You didn't have to swing a sword, you didn't have to clap back. You didn't have to dirty your hands, and still, their collapse is unfolding right in front of them. That's the mark of real justice. It leaves you clean while leaving them exposed. Let me ask you something. Have you noticed how revenge breeds more revenge, but justice ends the cycle? When humans retaliate, it usually spirals into endless chaos. Bitterness, retaliation, retaliation to retaliation. But when true justice steps in, the balance is restored once and for all. It's not about drama. It's not about spectacle. It's about clarity. People see your vindication, and it doesn't look messy. It looks undeniable. The truth reveals itself, and nothing speaks louder than that. And here's the part that burns your enemies the most. Justice always mirrors the seed. If they sowed lies, their downfall arrives through exposure. If they sowed betrayal, their own circle betrays them. If they sowed traps, they end up ensnared in their own net. That's not coincidence, that's consequence. The law of return doesn't play favorites. It simply multiplies whatever energy is released. This is why, chosen ones, you don't need to waste your time fantasizing about their suffering. You don't need to feed your soul with revenge when karma is already writing their story. The beauty is that while their world collapses with surgical precision, you rise untouched. Their chaos isn't your entertainment, it's your evidence. Evidence that the balance they tried to tamper with has snapped back into place. And what's even more devastating for them is how quiet your victory looks. It's not loud drama, it's not shouting, it's not clapping back. It's you moving forward, building higher, glowing brighter, and in that silence, their screams are louder, because nothing tortures a jealous soul more than watching the one they tried to break continue to stand taller. So remember this, chosen ones, your power is not in the fight. Your power is in the patience to let justice work with surgical precision. Revenge is for the impatient. Justice is for the powerful. And you were never meant to be impatient. You were meant to be undeniable. Their collapse isn't chaos, it's proof. Proof that what was sent out always circles back. Proof that no scheme survives its creator. Proof that you were never touchable, and that every arrow aimed at you was just building a case for their own exposure. So stand tall. Don't bend to the temptation of pettiness. Don't dirty your hands where clean victory is already written. Remember the title of this moment. A jealous group of people plotted against you, but the karma has already returned to sender. Their downfall is not your doing, it is their undoing. And your rise is not their punishment, it is your evidence. Evidence that precision always wins over pettiness. Number 5. How their alliance became their prison. Their alliance became their cage. When snakes coil together, they don't become stronger, they just suffocate each other faster. My dear chosen ones, let's break this down. The jealous ones thought they were clever. They believed that if they united, they would stand a chance. They thought numbers equaled strength, that secrecy equaled safety, that moving as one would guarantee your downfall. But here's the irony, they can never escape. Their unity didn't make them powerful, it made them prisoners. They didn't form an army, they built a cage. And now, every single one of them is locked inside. Think about it. What did they actually bind themselves with? Jealousy, hatred, lies. They wrapped their alliance in venom and called it strength. But venom doesn't bond, it corrodes. Hatred doesn't unite, it shackles. They didn't create power, they created bondage. And here's the hard truth they will choke on. When people gather for a cause rooted in destruction, their unity is already rotting from the inside. On the surface, it looks solid. Behind the curtain, it's fragile, toxic, ready to collapse under its own weight. Chosen ones, here's what they didn't understand. Unity itself is neutral. It multiplies whatever energy fuels it. When people come together in truth, their power grows. When they come together in lies, their destruction multiplies. And that's exactly what happened. They activated a principle without even realizing it. Instead of multiplying their chances of victory, they multiplied their failure. Instead of creating safety, they created suffocation. Their alliance was never power, it was a countdown clock to their collective collapse. Now, let's expose what's happening inside their so-called group. The same people who linked arms in jealousy are now side-eyeing each other in silence. Each one is wondering, who's going to crack first? Who's going to confess? Who's going to betray the rest just to save themselves? What was supposed to be their safe circle has turned into a pressure cooker. Distrust is creeping in like smoke filling a room, choking out whatever fake loyalty they pretended to have. And let's be brutally honest here. People who gather in envy never truly trust each other. Their only glue was hate for you. Nothing deeper, nothing solid, nothing pure. Hate burns hot, but it never lasts. So now they're stuck. They can't comfort each other because deep down they know none of them were ever friends. They were co-conspirators. They weren't united in love or truth. They were united in weakness. And that kind of bond always snaps under the weight of exposure. Chosen ones, let this fuel you. Their very gathering against you is what sealed their doom. If one person plotted, maybe they could slip away quietly. But because they joined hands, they chained themselves to each other's downfall. When one falls, all fall. They signed their names in agreement the moment they whispered your name in malice. And now every single one of them is bound to the same sinking ship. Picture it like this. A group of people tie themselves together with rope, thinking they're building an unbreakable chain. Then they jump into the water, aiming to drown you. But instead, they're the ones gasping for air, dragging each other under. That's what happens when unity is fueled by hatred. It becomes an anchor, not a lifeline. And here's the poetic twist they'll never escape. The very group they leaned on for courage is the same group that will watch them fall. There is no escape route, no clean break, no easy out. Because when you plot as a unit, you collapse as a unit. Their alliance wasn't power, it was a trap disguised as friendship. So, chosen ones, don't ever confuse the noise of the crowd with true strength. Numbers don't equal power. Character does, integrity does, truth does. And the fact that they needed numbers against you only proves that you carried more weight alone than they did as a group. The cage they built is tightening, and they are the ones locked inside. What was meant to make them unstoppable has become the weight that drags them down together. That is the curse of envy. It doesn't just destroy the individual, it poisons the entire circle reckless enough to join the plot. Their unity was never a shield, it was a coffin. And while they suffocate in the very cage they built, you, chosen one, stand freer, brighter, and stronger than ever before. Number 6. Silence was the sharpest weapon you held. Silence was the sword they never saw coming. Sometimes the loudest roar is the one spoken in silence. My dear chosen ones, one of the hardest lessons you'll ever face is this. Not every battle requires your fists, your words, or even your presence. When people come against you with lies, betrayals, and schemes, the instinct inside you screams to fight back. You want to clap back, expose them, drag their names through the mud the way they did yours. That urge is human, but chosen ones, the truth is more brutal and more liberating. You were never meant to fight this one. You were meant to witness. This is where most people fail the test. They believe silence equals weakness. They think if you don't respond, you're scared. If you don't retaliate, you must be confused. If you don't clap back, maybe you didn't have the courage. But what they'll never grasp is that silence, in the hands of the chosen, is not weakness. It's strategy. It's the kind of strategy that rattles their spirit, because it shows a strength they can't comprehend. Ask yourself this, chosen ones. If a lion turns its head at every barking dog, does it stop being king of the jungle, or does it waste its time? That's the metaphor you need to carry. Your silence wasn't surrender, it was authority. It was you looking your enemies dead in the eye without ever lifting a finger, saying, I don't need to respond to you because my existence already outlives your lies. Here's the raw truth they'll never recover from. Your silence spoke louder than any defense ever could. While they were running circles around each other, plotting, whispering, spreading rumors like wildfire, you stood still. Stillness is terrifying to people who thrive on chaos. They expected you to panic, to swing back, to fight dirty. Instead, you let their own actions betray them. You let their lies unravel on their own. You let their unity dissolve without ever lifting your hand. Chosen ones, silence is not passive, it's surgical. By refusing to engage, you stripped them of their power. Because let's be real, when people throw dirt on your name, their real hope is that you'll bend low enough to wrestle in the mud with them. They want you to lower your standard, drop your crown, and meet them where they live, in gossip, in schemes, in lies. But when you stayed silent, you denied them that victory. You reminded them that not everyone fights in the gutter. Some of us rise so high above the storm that we let thunder handle the noise. And here's what they never realized. Silence always puts the spotlight on the guilty. The more you refused to engage, the more they had to scream, louder and louder, desperate to get a reaction. And with every scream, they revealed themselves. With every rumor, they exposed their desperation. With every plot, they showed their cracks. You didn't have to defend yourself. Their behavior was your defense. But let's go deeper, chosen ones. Because the real secret here is this: you don't win by out-arguing. You don't win by out-scheming. You win by outlasting. That's the power of being chosen. While they burn themselves out with obsession, you keep rising. While they waste their nights plotting, you keep building. While they stay chained to their lies, you keep moving forward untouched. Survival itself becomes the sharpest form of victory. Think of silence as the checkmate they never saw coming. They were busy moving pawns, planning their little strategies, and you stood there quietly, knowing the game was already over. Your stillness was not fear. It was the final move. And now their own schemes are collapsing on their heads. Their words are backfiring. Their alliances are dissolving. And the only thing left standing in the rubble is you, untouched, unbothered, undeniable. Chosen ones, let me be clear. Your silence was never emptiness. It was weight. It carried authority. It carried presence. It carried the message that you don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to fight to win. And you don't need to respond to prove your strength. Your stillness was the weapon they never saw coming. And now, every time they look at you, every time they see you moving forward, every time they realize that all their effort amounted to nothing, they feel the sting of that silence all over again. Because silence leaves echoes, and those echoes remind them that they never broke you, they only exposed themselves. So no, chosen ones, you weren't supposed to fight back. You were supposed to watch. You were supposed to witness the unraveling, the exposure, the collapse. You were supposed to prove, once and for all, that patience is more powerful than revenge, and that silence is sometimes the deadliest sword in the room. Number 7. Hatred was just admiration in disguise. Their hate was just admiration wearing a mask. Envy is just admiration that was too weak to admit the truth. My dear chosen ones, let's rip the mask right off their faces. What they called hate, what they disguised as malice, what they spread as rumors and whispers, it was never truly hate. It was admiration in denial. The envy they carried was a warped confession that you had something they longed for, something they could never manufacture, something they couldn't duplicate no matter how much they copied or pretended. Their plotting wasn't born out of your weakness. It was triggered by your undeniable strength. That's the irony that burns them the most. Think about it. If you were fragile, if you were forgettable, if you were ordinary, nobody would waste their energy. Nobody loses sleep over someone who doesn't matter. But they did. They studied you. They monitored you. They obsessed over every detail, every word, every move. Why? Because the qualities you carry made them feel small in comparison. Your resilience magnified their fragility. Your authenticity exposed their fakery. Your calm confidence made their insecurities louder than ever. And instead of learning from you, instead of drawing inspiration, they chose the path of envy. Chosen ones, here's what you need to understand. Admiration is powerful, but when left unchecked, it decays. What could have been motivation turned into obsession. What could have sparked growth became a festering wound. They could have taken your light as proof that greatness is possible. They could have respected you, even joined forces with you. But envy doesn't allow that. Envy doesn't rise, it drags. It doesn't want to climb higher, it wants to pull down. And so they gathered in the shadows, whispering your name, plotting your downfall, thinking they could level the playing field by dimming your shine. But here's the harsh truth they never expected. Every insult, every rumor, every backhanded comment was not a reflection of you, it was a confession of them. Every time they spoke your name in malice, what they were really saying was, "I can't stop thinking about you." Every attempt to slander you was really them admitting, "You have something I'll never have." Envy is not random. It always targets the ones who stand taller, shine brighter, and walk freer. That's you, chosen ones. That's why they couldn't stop circling your life like moths around a flame. And the funniest part, they thought nobody would notice. They believed their hatred could disguise itself as justified anger, as casual criticism, as harmless gossip. But people can always see through the mask. When someone dedicates that much time to talking about you, it doesn't expose your flaws. It exposes their obsession. The world can recognize when hate is nothing more than an addiction to your presence. They thought their words were tearing you down, but all they really did was tell on themselves. Chosen ones, let me ask you, have you noticed how their every move revolved around you? They measured their worth against yours. They compared their progress to yours. You became the silent standard they could never reach. That's the secret they could never speak out loud, that you were the mirror they couldn't face. And so they turned admiration into aggression, because admitting the truth was too painful. But here's where karma strikes hardest. Because beneath all the noise, beneath all the fake confidence, beneath all the plotting, they knew the truth. And the truth was this: you were above them. Not because you begged for it, not because you fought for it, but because you embodied something they couldn't fake. You carried a presence they couldn't mimic, a strength they couldn't borrow, and a light they couldn't dim. That's why karma weighs so heavily on them now, because the more they fought you, the clearer it became that their hate was admiration they were too weak to admit. So remember this, chosen ones, their envy was never about destroying you. It was about destroying the constant reminder of what they could never become. They thought dragging you down would ease the sting of their own shortcomings, but all it did was expose them further. Every attack they launched became an accidental confession. Every rumor they spread became proof of their fixation. Every insult they hurled was a backhanded compliment announcing your superiority. And that is why they will never recover, because no matter how many stories they tell, no matter how loudly they pretend to despise you, the truth remains. They admired you. They admired the very strength they mocked. They admired the very light they tried to snuff out. They admired the very resilience they swore they hated. Their envy was never about you falling. It was about them being unable to rise. So wear their envy like a crown, chosen ones, because behind every ounce of hate is a mountain of admiration they were too broken to admit. And now, as karma spins the wheel and everything returns to sender, they're left facing the raw truth. You are everything they wanted to be, and nothing they do can erase it. Number 8. Darkness was never strategy, only delay. Their shadows became their spotlight. Darkness doesn't protect secrets. It only delays the day they're revealed in the loudest way possible. My dear chosen ones, let's rip the mask right off this one. They thought hiding in the dark made them clever. They thought whispering behind closed doors, plotting in silence, and moving like snakes in the grass gave them an advantage. To them, secrecy felt like power. But here's the truth they never saw coming. Darkness isn't strategy. Darkness is nothing more than borrowed time. They mistook silence for brilliance, but silence without truth is just cowardice. They thought invisibility meant safety, but invisibility only makes the spotlight harsher when it finally arrives. And it always arrives, because whispers don't stay whispers forever. They grow into echoes that eventually fill entire rooms. What they thought was hidden is already on display, louder, clearer, and more humiliating than they ever prepared for. Chosen ones, let's break this down. When people gather against you in secret, they convince themselves they're untouchable. They imagine their fake smiles and polite handshakes will cover the stench of betrayal. They tell themselves that if no one sees it now, no one will ever see it. But secrecy doesn't erase the truth. It only stores it. Every fake laugh, every backhanded comment, every scheming conversation. It's like putting files into a cabinet marked evidence. And eventually, that cabinet bursts open at the exact time it's supposed to. And here's the part they underestimated. The universe has a way of amplifying what's done in the shadows. It doesn't just expose, it magnifies. What they thought would remain locked behind closed doors ends up projected on the biggest screen for everyone to watch. Their secret has become their sentence, their whispers, their testimony, their darkness, their downfall. Now I know what you're thinking, chosen ones. But why didn't it come out sooner? Why did they seem to get away with it for so long? Because exposure is timed. Darkness buys them a false sense of control, but it also sets the trap deeper. The longer they stay hidden, the bigger the collapse when it all unravels. Exposure delayed is not exposure denied, it's exposure multiplied. The longer they build their lies, the higher the tower and the harder the crash when it falls. Think of it like this. A storm brewing over the ocean looks quiet at first. No one sees the chaos beneath the waves. But when it reaches the shore, it doesn't arrive gently. It crashes with force that can't be ignored. That's exactly what's happening to them. They thought silence was safety, but it was just the calm before their destruction. And chosen ones, let this motivate you. Their plotting was never proof of your weakness. It was proof of their desperation. They didn't dare face you head on, so they tried hiding in shadows. But shadows can't hold forever. Light always forces darkness to scatter, and when it does, their arrogance becomes comedy, their strategy becomes embarrassment, and their lies become the evidence that convicts them. Here's the irony they'll choke on. The more they tried to hide, the more obvious their guilt became. You've seen it before. The person who insists too much, denies too loudly, acts too perfect. That's how darkness betrays itself. It doesn't need anyone else to expose it. It self-destructs. And that's the curse of choosing shadows as your weapon. It tricks you into thinking you're in control, when in reality you're digging your own grave, brick by brick, lie by lie. So chosen ones, remember this. Every secret meeting they held, every fake smile they flashed, every rumor they thought was whispered safely in the dark, it's all circling back. Not as rumor, not as suspicion, but as evidence. Their secrets have transformed into spotlights. Their whispers have turned into megaphones. Their strategy has become their downfall. They dressed arrogance in the costume of wisdom, but costumes don't last. They fall apart at the first touch of truth. And now their so-called cleverness is unraveling in public, where excuses don't work and masks don't stick. Everyone can see them for what they are. They tried to hide from accountability, but accountability is now chasing them down with no place left to run. Chosen ones, take this as fuel. The ones who tried to destroy you in the shadows are now choking on their own silence. They believed that hiding was strength, but hiding was the very thing that exposed them. And you didn't need to lift a finger. You didn't need to chase, prove, or fight. You simply had to keep walking in your lane while their shadows turned into their spotlight. So let the record show, their secrets didn't stay buried. They became their chains. What they thought nobody would ever know is now the very thing everybody is talking about. Their darkness wasn't a weapon, it was their downfall. And chosen ones, that's the ultimate reminder. When people move against you in secrecy, don't panic. Don't lower yourself to their level. Just wait. Because darkness always runs out of time, and when the light hits, exposure isn't just possible, it's guaranteed. Number 9. The fallout that echoes across generations. The ripple effect they never saw coming. When envy plants its seed, it doesn't just poison the soil, it poisons the entire garden for generations to come. My dear chosen ones, listen closely, because this truth cuts deeper than most people can handle. The jealous group that rose against you thought their actions stopped in the moment. They believed their whispers were temporary, their lies isolated, their plots nothing more than a quick strike. But chosen ones, envy doesn't die where it's planted. It grows roots, it multiplies, and it spreads into places they never expected, beyond their own lives, into the very lineage that comes after them. That is the weight of their actions. They weren't just gambling with their present, they were gambling with their bloodline. Every decision carries echoes, every scheme carries residue, every seed planted, whether good or bad, grows into something future generations must face. This is the ripple effect they never calculated when they set their sights on you. And here's where the irony cuts them deepest. While they thought they were burying you, they were burying their own descendants under the rubble of consequences. What they meant for you will be tasted by their children, their grandchildren, their entire line. Because karma doesn't stop at the individual. It flows like a river through everything connected to them. Let me break it down for you, chosen ones, because I know the question in your mind. Why would the next generation pay for the jealousy of this one? The answer is this. Patterns repeat until someone is strong enough to break them. Seeds grow until someone uproots them, and most people never have the courage to do that. If envy is sown into a bloodline, it breeds bitterness, division, misfortune, and cycles of brokenness. That isn't punishment, it's consequence. What you feed into the soil is what grows back, multiplied. This is why their actions against you feel so heavy. They weren't just spreading gossip, they weren't just scheming in corners, they weren't just plotting against your name. They were signing their entire family into a contract of consequences they never once considered. The jealousy they spewed doesn't vanish when they do. It lingers, it attaches. It becomes the very atmosphere their descendants breathe until someone consciously chooses differently. Chosen ones, I want you to picture it like this. Envy is like toxic smoke. When someone lights it up, they don't realize it drifts into their own home, into their children's lungs, into every corner of the legacy they're supposed to be building. And while they tried to choke you with it, all they really did was poison their own air. That is the brutal truth. But here's the deeper layer. It was never about revenge. It was about balance. Karma is not designed to simply punish. It is designed to teach. What they tried to unleash on you has circled back, not to amuse you, but to correct them. Their descendants may now find themselves wrestling with the same darkness, not because of you, but because it's the echo of choices their parents or grandparents unleashed. And until someone rises in their line with the courage to break the cycle, the weight will remain. Meanwhile, chosen ones, look at your position. You rise free, you rise vindicated. You carry no residue of their actions because you never chose that path. They tried to bind you with envy, but it never latched. And now, while you stand taller than before, they are left with generations asking the question, why does misfortune keep knocking at our door? And the answer, though they may never want to admit it, will always be the same. Because envy doesn't end when the conversation ends. It echoes. This is the consequence they never considered. What they thought was a private plot has become a generational story. While your survival becomes testimony, their downfall becomes inheritance. And that inheritance isn't gold or glory. It's the burden of jealousy they planted. That's why it's never wise to come against a chosen one. Because when you do, you don't just wound yourself. You scar the ones who come after you. Chosen ones, take this as motivation. Their envy is proof of your significance, and their generational weight is proof of their carelessness. You are free, you are untouchable, you are rising, and they are learning that when you choose to plot against someone fireproof, the flames don't burn them. They burn everything connected to you. And so, chosen ones, remember this: every plot against you was never really about your fall. It was about exposing their weakness and fueling your rise. Their envy became their trap, their jealousy their downfall, while your survival stands as the loudest form of justice. If this message hit home and you felt the truth resonate, show your strength, smash that like button, subscribe to join this community of chosen ones. Drop the number 77 in the comments to declare your rise, and share this video with someone who needs to see that karma always returns to sender.